Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for your patience. I hope you all had a good lunch. We had, I think, lovely sandwiches here. I enjoyed mine anyway. I appreciate everybody's patience, but we are back on schedule. A little bit of a change of our program for the afternoon. So we are going to have each of the vendors speaking about their product and maintenance about the product, and then take questions right away. But we're thinking some of the questions might apply to everybody. So we're going to do similarly to this morning and have the vendors do their presentation, sit down at the table, and then we'll take questions for all of them at the end. And we think that we'll still end on time today, so you get to enjoy this beautiful day. I am unfortunately having to speak to you again, and sorry about that. I wasn't supposed to be in this spot. Josh Paleko is our sales VP. How do I get rid of that thing, Jack? And, oh, there he is. We want him there, don't we?
Yeah,
Wait, I want to move him over.
just hit the.
Hey, Josh. Josh is at home with a
Hey, good
103 degree
afternoon.
temperature.
Yeah,
Uh-oh.
I figured I'd spare everyone from feeling like this, so appreciate you guys joining.
We're trying to hear you right now, Josh. Hold on a second. We
Oh,
can
we
turn
can
on
do
them.
like-
Oh, should we turn it on? Probably. One moment, everybody. We're
No
gonna turn
problem.
on the mics. It's in. Down there. Yeah, I'm so thankful that you're doing all this stuff for us.
It's really funny that I was a gal in the chair on the presentation, but like I am terrible when it comes to like anything outside of my computer.
They're gone.
Yeah.
Okay,
Hi, Josh.
say a word, Josh.
Can you guys hear me?
I think it's this little bitty computer speaker.
Can you hear me?
Unmute, volume. Not working. Oh,
Yeah.
there we go, there we
Give it a try now.
go. Keep saying tests, test.
Test.
Oh,
It sounds
it's
like,
working.
I think sounds
that?
like everyone's could hear me. Great.
Sort of working. Excuse me. You're gonna have to just talk loudly, I think.
All right, I'll try.
All right, people, sorry about that. I just pushed all those buttons and they're not doing anything yet. So we're gonna see how this goes. I am obviously not in the field person much, and so I'm going to tell you about some of basically the idea here is what happens now. You've heard about inspection, you've heard about data collection. What do you do once you find out what maintenance you need? So we're going to talk about some of those field things. And mostly it's a show and tell of what pictures we see on the screen, because this isn't the stuff I do every day. But then Josh will help us out because he does do this stuff more so. And I want to just start with one. Get my mouse over here. So like I just said, your PE inspection, your professional engineer inspection has been completed. Maintenance items were discovered. Now what do you do? We are working on a site right now, site and client names to be not disclosed because this is a really critical site. We have some crazy sinkholes, and this is happening around some infiltration cells. This was like moving every day, this sinkhole, and this is huge. It's like 10 feet across, probably 20 feet long, which leads to this, which is much huger. This is about a football field size underground storage. And it's not the fault of the underground storage, because these are happening in their bioswales, in their dry detention areas. There are problems all over the place. And it's maybe something to do with constructability, something to do with the construction methods that were used in a certain area, but also maybe something to do with maintenance. And so this is kind of like well, we would know at this point, this was all paved, in the prior picture. And that was supposed to be a concrete curb that would be level in the background. And things just started to basically sinkhole right in the middle of this area. And it's not a everyday kind of scenario, but it's an example of like, you need to maintain stuff. You need to know what's going on underground. You need to be in there looking with some CCTV if you have any inkling. And some of those things that you might see are minor. Like we'll see pictures of this basic sinkholes, and Sometimes they're minor, but they can become much larger. And so at AQUALIS, the field operations use a standard operating procedure so that whatever type of BMP or stormwater control measure you have is going to follow a certain protocol in the way of following from inspection to preventive maintenance, and then to repair if needed. Repair, okay, restoration, a little bit bigger issue, and then full rehabilitation where it's needed. So we hope you don't have to go to the full rehabilitation point, but we can help you along the way. Also, as engineers, of course, we'll see something that's like going wrong and we'll go like, why is it going wrong? We should see if we need to analyze and reinvent or, you know, redesign this, because that's kind of our fun part, is doing the analysis. And sometimes we come up with the way it was done that first time maybe wasn't the best idea 20 years ago. There might be a pretty easy retrofit that we could do to make this much better for long-term, you know, have a longer life and not be so difficult to maintain. So just a couple of things on what types of maintenance are expected and routine. Nothing is really rocket science here, but just so you know, BMPs are designed, the ones that are designed with non-native, we had a little conversation this morning about non-natives, they need to be mowed like normal turf grass. And unfortunately, that means really regularly, once a month, maybe. In some climates, maybe more often. But so now you're going to have equipment out there all the time, mowing lawns. And this might look like a landscaper job, but really it's a little bit more than that when we're dealing with stormwater measures, because what type of equipment are okay to be using in those cities is not always the same thing. Sometimes we don't want compaction. Sometimes we don't want a larger piece of equipment running through the bottom of this. Maybe it's just dry detention, but it could be a bioswale. So, you know, we don't want a giant tractor out there compacting all the soil. And this is the kind of thing that our field guys know and understand, and they're able to connect the dots when it comes to what maintenance is the right maintenance. Woody vegetation is you heard about that many times, can really weaken embankments. Those things need to be maintained. Invasive vegetation, if it's a non-native and you have invasives, you mow it. If it's natives and you have invasives, there's more processes involved in that if you really want your natives to take off. And so then it's more of a selective, you know, only twice a year, you're going to deadhead those invasives, you're going to do a little spot treating with chemicals. It's a little bit more involved. I don't know why my screen is cutting off on top, but sediment and trash removal and debris removal from a lot of the points of entry and discharge. Again, it seems like, yeah, that's not all that difficult. Well, then get out and do it. It really means get a shovel, you know, clean out those inlets, clean out the outlets. If you don't do that, very simple, small thing, you can end up having a plugged system. Then you overflow and you flood somebody, or your embankment for the pond gets wiped out. If it's an outlet structure that's plugged, you could be pulling off the whole end sections of your pipe if that system isn't being maintained. And, you know, it's just one thing, a little thing happens to start to unravel, and then you end up with a lot of expensive stuff to deal with. Josh, jump in anytime you want to add something to this, because I know I can really ramble.
You're doing great. I'll keep going.
Okay, catch basin accumulation, same thing. Sometimes it's just clean out your catch basin, but if you don't, then it means potentially plugging your system again. Could end up having sinkholes as a result of that, because the water's going to want to go somewhere, and if it can't go through the pipe, it's going to find a joint, and then, you know, the whole system gets to be a mess. We're going to hear from a couple of the proprietary system people, so I'll save this for them. But some of them do include, you know, maybe a valve that needs to be opened and closed every now and then to make sure you could dewater or get things to be working. Sometimes you want to close a valve to over detain to create more storage. And if the valves stop working, then the system isn't going to work for you.
Yeah, and Carrie, the one thing I'll add is, you know, and I know you guys know this, but all locations are different and unique and have their own, you know, different types of assets or proprietary systems that they have on site. So the frequency that we're servicing these from a maintenance perspective, time of year, obviously you want to get to the undergrounds before the, you know, in the spring and fall to make sure, you know, the water's flowing during rainy season. And so frequency will will be unique by property and geography. So we take that in account as we build these maintenance scopes of work to make sure we're, visiting these sites at the appropriate time.
Thanks, Josh. I have to hold the computer in a real funny way, so it's the microphone, so hopefully it's working. Pervious and permeable and grass pavers, they're their own sort of headache in a different way. And that maintenance will depend upon what type they are largely. Manufacturers have a certain recommendation of how you should maintain. So usually it's, you can see the whole list. You observe first whether or not you're having issues by ways of clogging, staining, ponding, settling. Perform some infiltration tests to see what you're actually getting. And then if it's not where it should be, then it's another indication that you need to get out there and do some maintenance. Sometimes it's every 6 months. It depends on your receiving area. If there's a lot of mulch and landscaping and leaf debris and, some kinds of trash, cigarette smokers throw their butts out on the parking lot and they clog the, infiltration. Then you need to get out there, often. And then if there are places where it's pretty wide open and not a lot of debris, you could probably go for a couple of years. And then if it is a type that has a joint stone, as soon as you clean that, a lot of the joint stone leaves, that needs to be replenished, or your pavers will start to move around and not do their job. Infiltration, biofiltration, rain gardens, anything that's green, similar to some of the stuff you've seen, only we don't just go out and mow. Then we have to selectively mow. Maybe it's once or twice a year at the right time of the year. Repair erosion areas, replace any dead vegetation with healthy new natives. Remove engineered soil and amend it. If it is starting to clog, if you see ponding, you might see like bare areas or something that will indicate like this water's been ponding there a lot. So we need to just take that out and replace it with new. Look at the embankments and overflow weirs. We saw some dead critters on the screen this morning. I don't know if Leif is still here. I don't know. I kind of would rather try to do live traps and move them off if you can call a service for that. But, if you have too many and it's not worth your moving the muskrats and you'd rather have a muskrat fur coat, then that's your choice. I don't know. I'm a hunter, so I'm not, totally, but. And then we have a couple of repairs and case studies. So similar to the first slide, but not quite as critical or crazy. This is common, right? You see manholes and inlets that have pavement breaking around the edges. You see sinkholes in parking lots. That really means that water is getting into that structure somewhere else. And it's not going in the right way. It's not going in the inlet where it's supposed to be going in. It's going down the sides into the structure, or water is leaving like joints in a pipe. So really getting a CCTV out there first and getting an inspection to see what's going on is a nice first step. In this case, it's remove the bad pavement and excavate around the manhole and seal the manhole and then replace it all. Josh, tell me, I feel like, nope, you missed a step, because I'm not really the person doing it all. I'm just the person saying.
These are common failure points, obviously, with the aging infrastructure around properties, but also the freeze thaw. I mean, these are common repairs that we, do thousands of every year. And it's just making sure there's not a safety issue, or if it goes unaddressed, it becomes a larger, more catastrophic issue. So make sure you're inspecting those and addressing if they do need repaired, so you don't have a larger repair down the road.
Reset this into by the microphone. Folks online, I hope you can hear when Josh is talking. They can hear. Good. Okay. It's, sometimes you got to pivot last minute. We didn't know Josh was going to be sick. We're really thankful Josh didn't bring us his illness, so we'll make it work. And that you could still be here, so that those previous situations lead to bigger situations like you're seeing here, where there's pipe damage and then there's sinkholes. And not all sinkholes are a result of pipe damage, but a lot of times that we see in an urban setting. If there's karst geology, it's a different story. Could be other reasons that are subsoil related, but getting CCTV of that, knowing the age of your infrastructure, having asset management, that's really important to know. When was that pipe installed? Are you using a corrugated metal pipe that's gonna corrode over time and you know it's 30 years and you're in a site that there's a lot of corrosive material? It might be time to, it's that first chart that I showed you of you can wait till the end until you have this, or you can spend a little time every year making sure that your house is in order.
Yeah, no, the one thing, just going back to that, Carrie, is, we're seeing a large increase in these more catastrophic sinkhole failures across the country, really. And, the one thing that we have been doing for the last 18, 24 months as of late is, we're doing a lot of proactive inspections inside the pipes with CCTV, but also, GPR and ERT to understand the soil density and soil column around those pipes if there's any voids. So we could, obviously address those before you get to this stage. So, property owners, managers are coming to us maybe even before they purchase a property, or they do a big capital to do these initial inspections to, again, to drive, it's a very inexpensive cost versus what you see on this page. So it's
Awesome.
definitely an increase.
Josh, do you know a lot about this site? Because I'll say what I see, but that's about all I know.
Yeah, no, I don't, but to this, it's very, self-explanatory as far as this HOA. We work with a lot of different HOAs and different property owners. This one had a neglected area of, overgrown vegetation, pipe failure. The outlet was clogged and ultimately it impacted the retaining wall. So again, something that could have been, maintained on an ongoing basis at a, very inexpensive frequency. It's becomes a much larger repair and getting, engineering involved, structural engineers to make sure we bring that area back up to design to stabilize the area.
Similar that it's a pond, but a little different story. This is a pond in Michigan that looks like hasn't been maintained. A lot of invasive species, a lot of excessive sedimentation, and now the pond's not functioning. I'm sure the outlet's probably plugged, and then they go in and dredge it, and then all the soil is not stabilized. So then that all ends up in the hole, and it just becomes kind of a vicious cycle, especially if the rainfall is not cooperating with you. And so basically making sure that you get the right stabilization when you install is pretty important. Sometimes Mother Nature doesn't play along. Josh, just jump in, and if you want to talk about this one too looks pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Another outlet control structure.
Yeah, another neglected, retention pond, and the OCS is obviously in rough shape. So we ultimately excavated and replaced the pipe and, removed the sediment and debris that was in the pond. And then obviously the invasives that we were able to remove. But again, these are very common failure points. Property owners, managers get in the habit of, if it's budget constraints or maybe just not knowing, that over years of neglect becomes much larger, issues. So it's just all about, taking over that property when it's constructed, or, get it to a maintainable state and keep that maintenance up to eliminate some of the larger repairs that you're seeing.
I've just gotten a hand signal from one of our staff, Josh, and I won't say which kind, but it basically was like, you better hustle.
Hurry up.
No, we have 2 minutes, so we got to talk fast.
All right.
This one's boring, so I'm gonna skip it. Basically, pipe separation, CIPP. No fun. I mean, fun, but not fun. This is talking about what's preventive maintenance? What does that look like? What is your typical site visit going to look like? And everybody will get a copy or be able to scan through these screens if you want to pause, take a look. But basically, you're looking at inspection and then vegetation management, structure management, maintenance, and documenting this. The documentation is important because now when you do get a violation or it's time to submit for a recertification on your BMP, you have all this documentation that you can provide to agencies without having to scramble at the last minute. Stormwater pond maintenance, again, it doesn't have to be expensive or overly, difficult or, we're gonna go out there and look at mowing, taking out invasive species, outlet control, looking at the overflows, looking at eroded areas and fixing them. We do a lot with CCTV and jetting and Vector, so getting in those systems and cleaning them up before they become a problem that is gonna cause you a lot more trouble. Those things that are out of sight can be out of mind and then can be a real headache. Now, Josh is gonna tell you about one of our clients that we are doing a lot of all of this for, right, Josh?
Yeah, so I'll try to run through this quickly and but the main objective, the national, multi-site QSR, Chick-fil-A, what they were after is ultimately get a better understanding of what assets they have on their property, what condition are these assets in, and then ultimately making those corrective repairs if any are needed, and then implementing an ongoing maintenance plan. So, a couple thousand standalone properties throughout the country. We're going out to collect this asset information. As you can see on this one, you have an aerial of where those assets names are. So going through those, taking photos, and then obviously there's some basic questions that we're answering to better understanding and ultimately give that back to the team at Chick-fil-A. So, it's a pretty robust inspection, pretty basic information, but it provides a lot of value to not only the customer, but to us as we kind of come up with the plan from capital repairs, ongoing repairs, but also the maintenance that we're talking about today. So this one is an example. As we went through the inspection, we saw, you go back one. Yeah. So at this particular site, there was a few things that needed addressed. Obviously, we needed to do a pond, a basin dredge, pipe replacement, and some structural clearing and rehab of some overgrown vegetation. So the one thing that we, take obviously pride on is we line item and give great detail on what we're actually addressing, because it also allows the customer, the property owner, property manager, provide this information to the municipality if there's questions on what was completed, when it was completed. So it does give great detail. And then lastly, we've kind of gone through the scope of work and completed these repairs. We do provide, obviously before after photos of kind of what the site looks like and ultimately what we addressed. And so it gives the full picture from the start to finish, to inspect the property, make the necessary repairs, and then implementing the maintenance program for ongoing maintenance at this property to make sure it's stays within compliance. And then ultimately functionality is critical to the site as well.
Okay. We really hustled in that last 2 minutes.
I would have kept talking, but you told me to hurry up, so that's okay.
You did good. That was good. And then you don't have to exhaust yourself. You can save your energy to heal up. Josh, we're gonna probably jump to our next speaker. And then if you want to hang on when we get to the panel, if there are questions for you, then maybe everybody can hold their question till then, and then we'll do some communication. We have Sarah Janicek from SJ Landscaping. And Karen Janicek. They are not related, but their name just happens to be the same. Not true. They're mom-daughter duo.
Yep.
And I will let you give background on your company.
Yes, thank you. Hi, my name's Sarah Janicek. I'm the owner of SJ Landscaping. Before I start, just so you know, I have hearing impairment, so my articulation might be off. So bear with me. So just to give a little background about us, well, first of all, thank you for having us. And again, just a little about the work that SJ Landscaping does. We currently maintain over 300 bioswales, and we constructed a total of 66 bioswale rain garden. We also lay over 100,000 square feet of permeable pavers. And also we installed 30,000 square feet of underground soil modules. It's kind of a new thing. It's really cool. All right, so that's our company. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so Carrie and I will be going over the importance of inspection and maintenance of bioswale and native seed misses. It's interesting. I remember last year I was inspecting a bioswale and I had this woman walking by, she stopped and she said, "What are you looking at?" She said, I don't understand why, city wants plant and weed. And she said, "I call it a mess." And I politely, explained to her, what bioswale is, and I explained the function and why it's important to have bioswale. And we talked for about 10-20 minutes, and then she thanked me for, I gave her explaining the purpose of bioswale, and she said, "Now I feel better about where my tax dollars is going to." And she said she'll make sure she has that information in her neighborhood, try to educate them. Let's see. In the rural bioswale maintenance plant, positive and we own nativity. I like that quote. So I thought I would share it. All right, so key takeaway. Oh, sorry, my apology. So we want to cover the importance of bioswale native seed inspection and maintenance, because there's been more of a native seeds missing in our projects. So I figure it's important for us to cover that. And also understanding the consequences of bioswale and native seed maintenance, because they're different. And the importance of native plant. And also education that are required for bioswale and native seed maintenance. So now when we talk about the importance of bioswale maintenance, we also want to mention bioswale, bioretention, and regarded their functional similar with variance in engineering element. They all manage stormwater runoff and they improve water quality. However, they're different in their design and purpose, but not so much in maintenance. So the poor bioswale maintenance, it comes with consequences. And with neglect of maintenance, it can actually be expensive, costly, and time consuming. So what happens is if bioswales stop filtering, I'm sorry, when it flooded, it may stop filtering the marine water, causing pollutant to enter the waterway. And also the ponding causes root rot. And we also have seen overgrown shrub plant. They entangle, which inhibit drainage and kills off the other native plant. And also the worker, they complain about rose bushes because they have thorns, and the root can entangle in the actual drain system. Once they understand the root or the thorn shrub, they're good for trapping the trash and leave debris and thrive in water environment. They come appreciate them. The public perception is very important, as just as earlier I share encounter I have with citizens. Sometimes people ask me what I do, and I love to share the grievous structure of my job. And 90% of the time, they have no knowledge and express positive comment after our discussion. There are it's that affect bioswale performance. If the plants are dead or dying, their ability to perform their biological goal is diminished. If sediment, leaves, and trash block the inlet, the bioswale will not be able to take in storm water flowing from the street, which may cause flooding. If it was left unmaintained too long, fallen leaves tend to form matting, which making water difficult to penetrate past the leaf litter layer into soil below. This matting can also suffocate the perennial plant in the bioswale. It's it's okay to leave some leaves for nutrient. They provide a habitat for moth, dragonfly. So it's just a few is okay, but in my opinion. So if any above occur, bioswale are actually less effective in reducing bacteria level in the storm runoff. Native plants imported, they're very hardy. They can tolerate untoward condition, and they also provide habitat for and food for wildlife, and is essential for human assistance, and is healthy for our ecosystem. They also stabilize and provide structure to bioswale, filter and reduce pollutant and bacteria. If the area is like sparse, there's no native plant, it can cause erosion pretty badly. So it's important. When it comes to education, I'm gonna hand over to Karen.
Good afternoon. I'm Karen Janicek. I do a lot of the oversight quality of the bioswales and our staff, our contractors. And so education is very important. That's one thing we really work with our employees and our contractors. We just don't assume the contractor knows how to clean a bioswale. So, we go out, we work with them, and then once we have a comfort level, then they're on their own. And then we go back, they send me a list of which ones they did, and then I go back out and do a check. Bioswale construction, we do bioswale construction. It is important, and I know we're talking about maintenance, but when we do bioswale construction, this is a good opportunity for us to educate the public, the people that we work with. And something that you as engineers may want to adopt as a best practice, and this is was our discussion, that when you hire a contractor to develop and build the bioswale, you want to have them scope it at the end. Because we had a situation where we were working in an area where there was competing companies working on other things, electric. We had our underground under drain in, and then we were waiting to get back in and finish it. Well, we noticed that they had some heavy equipment in and around the area, and so Sarah said, went up to him and said, "Hey guys, we have our under drain in there. I don't know that you should be over this area." And they said, no, it's PVC. It's gonna last, it could take this much PSI. So Sarah went with a hunch and said, we got to scope this. And good thing we did, because that was cracked. I mean, it was cracked right in the middle. Had we listened to them, we would have had a damaged pipe, and then there would have been finger pointing along the way. So we were able to capture that early. So Sarah adopted the idea, anytime she builds a bioswale, she'll scope it before the end. And then that way it releases any quality issues or concerns from a contractor that her company broke something, or especially when you're working with competing entities in the field. Native plants, we educate native plants and seed mixes. We were asked to help another landscaper plant, I think it was 20,000 plants. And yeah. And Sarah noticed a couple of their employees were planting deep emergent plants in a shallow area. So again, especially you've got homeowners that are going to be planting, they should know and follow the plans. I could see them. In fact, we have seen them introduce their own plants that were not native into private bioswale areas, rain gardens. The purpose of the native plants, they should know that. Our folks know that really well. Traffic control, very, very important. You know, we have a lot of areas in Milwaukee County that people really go really fast. And so we want to protect our employees, and we make them carry a manual, and we make them recite how far, how wide of an area that they can put the cones and barrels and the signage that they have. We require that, we give them signage that we need out in the field. Inspections, I have a copy and I'm going to show that to you. And it's important when they're inspecting that you have a copy of the planting plan. Because then when you're going through the inspection, if you say, oh, this is a sedge, oh, we need a sedge, this is dead, I'm going to pull it and replace it. It just makes for easier transition to replace. Follow your maintenance requirement. It's not all cookie cutter. Everyone has their own nuances and what they want to see as far as maintenance. Invasive species, I know, you know, we'll go out and it just drives us crazy. We'll see people going like this and, you know, and then they leave them in a pile and they go to the next area, leave them in a pile. That is not the proper way to handle invasive species. So what we have our folks do is we have them have their bag right there. And they have a bottle of water, gallon of water, and they'll water that invasive species and pull it out. That way you're insured, you're gonna get the root, the whole root, because if it breaks off, you're just gonna, we've had people say, why are there so many, you know, weeds in this? I just weeded it a week ago. Well, if you're not pulling it out correctly, and if you're shaking it all over the place, laying it, then picking it up, there's so many different opportunities for that to reseed elsewhere. So have your bag and don't bring that bag to another bioswale, because then it falls out and tips over. And now you have another new invasive species and a different one. So we do, that's another important aspect of how you handle those weeds. Equipment and scope, like we talked about, we scope, but also we scope if we see damage. 9 times out of 10, if you have a car accident in a bioswale and it's really near your structures, the chances are you're going to have that. And I have a picture of one of them that we had. Resources for plant identification. A lot of times, even though we feel like our folks know plant identification or weed identification as well, Sarah makes sure they all have and pays for an application called Plant This. That way they're not calling us 20 times, hey, look at this one, look at this one. So they'll just take a picture and it will tell them. So a web application is really crucial. It's been very helpful for us. PPE, very important, you know, puncture resistant gloves, steel toed shoes, high vis vests, the works. I want to tell you that it's very important because we encounter so many different things in a bioswale. Needles, you know, there'll be uncapped needles, and then we have a bunch of leaves, and our people might go in and want to grab a whole pile of leaves. And guess what? Suck that. Now you have a biohazard incident. So you make sure your folks have the puncture resistant gloves, if anything. And it's funny because we find all sorts of things in the bioswales. One time I had an employee call and say, guess what? We found a dead person in the bioswale. And I go, what? I said, call the police. And then I said, well, like what? Tell me more. And then they said, it was an urn. They found an urn with ashes in there. And I said, call the police because we want to make sure Victoria gets home. So, you know, we find money, we found a gun. So your people need to know how to handle the gun. Don't touch it, call the police. They have a special way of handling it, or you're going to be part of an investigation. So, you know, these little things that you don't think that, you know, dead animals, for instance, we don't want them to touch it because of that biohazard implication. So City of Milwaukee will come out and remove any dead animals. So there's a lot of nuances to the maintenance that, you know, not just pulling weeds or, you know, it's finding these kind of treasures. This is a copy of our inspection report, and it's just, you know, basic information, pretty much what you're going to see on your contract and maintenance plan, visuals, vegetation, swale areas, inlet, and miscellaneous. And if anyone wants a copy of that, we're happy to provide that. Okay, spring cleanup. You know, spring cleanup to us is one of the most important aspects of bioswale maintenance, because if you do a good job, you are going to have less issues with subsequent visits. And what I mean by that is making sure you clean the debris, weeds and all that, because like Sarah said, a lot of times we just go in on spring cleanup and we probably take about 80% of the mulch out. I would say probably 20-30% is already gone from wind and all sorts of things, but we will remove it because 9 times out of 10 it's decomposed and packed. And it's just, you can just pick them up, in chips. So we like to, clean it out and put a nice fresh layer. That also prevents the weeds from coming up. 2 to 3 inches. I know Sarah likes 4 inches. Prevent the light from coming in and those weeds growing. So even our employees, hurry, we got to get the mulch down. We got to get the mulch down. So they're just as concerned about getting that in. Inspect and clean all the curb inlets and structures. Clean the cobblestones. A lot of people hate doing the cobble. You got to take all the cobble out, inspect your filtering fabric. If your filtering fabric's damaged in any way, holes, you want to replace it. I would say we notice like around 3 to 5 year mark is when you're probably looking to need to change that filter fabric. And a lot of times when our people call and say, I just noticed that we had to do a little reassemble of the cobble because people steal it. So, when you have pretty cobble, you're gonna, you might have that. Inspect and remove debris, geotextile, replace the mulch, hand remove weeds. That's what we like to do. I know some plans may call for like an approved herbicide and you can do that. But we like to hand remove because we have a greater success of less germination in other areas, etc. Prune shrub, proper shaping, removal up to 1/3 of the shrub. We do get complaints periodically from the public because the tall grasses and sometimes the shrubbery will cause visual issues, obstructions on the highway, especially. So we'll have to get back out and cut. If they're damaged, our thought is we might move into a low dwarf type shrub for that. Monthly bioswale should occur every month or more often as needed. A few times we have a couple areas that we got to go back because we might have, more trash in one area. And so we might go back just to do a trash pickup a couple weeks later. But we kind of know our areas, with 300, over 300, we know our areas that we have to go back to and check. Again, if you have channelization, I don't know if anyone talked about that. You'll see like a big groove in the soil, the engineered soil. That tells us there's high flow. And so what we'll do a lot of times, we'll either say, let's get some cobble there, talk to the engineer, whoever, or we'll put a different planting there with a greater stable structure and root system. And then that usually takes care of that channeling. Those are just like a little river coming through. Remove trash, debris, spot spray, again, prune, pretty much what we talked about in the earlier one. Here's a picture of one of the scopes that we did. You can see all this damage right here. And then there was some damage under here. So it really behooves us to periodically scope. And so again, if you want to incorporate that into a best practice or a maintenance plan, it's inexpensive for the scope. And if you really wanted to, you could get, I don't know, with the water, but you have to be careful not to put it at a high PSI because you can crack for little clogs, we've been able to move them with just a little PSI, but some people want to go in full guns and that could break the PVC piping as well. So keep that in mind when you're looking to do that. Fall cleanup, again, spring is our biggest, and then fall is our biggest. There's not much change with what we're doing in fall, except I want to point out, cut down perennials and shrubs, exclude plants that provide interest. And what we mean by that is like the evergreen grasses. You know, they stay green all winter long, so let's leave them. And also they provide a habitat for dragonflies and some other habitat. The other thing that we will not cut in fall is if it's a newly created bioswale, we will not cut or deadhead anything because we want to make sure that it's well rooted before. So we wait till spring and then we'll deadhead and do cutting for a newly constructed bioswale. So that again is important to share with whether it's homeowners or other landscapers, whoever's doing the maintenance. Native seed, like Sarah talked earlier about, it's a supplementary food source. It's pretty diverse. It blooms and blooms all throughout the season. It's made up of native grasses, sedges, wildflowers, but we are seeing more and more, especially for vast areas, native seed mix. And you can have as little as a 3 combination seed up to a 50 combination seed mix. And so our folks are having a really hard time. How do we do this big native area? How do we know it's a weed? How, and you don't know early on, and you wait till it starts growing. But what Sarah decided to do is she calls AgriCall. So you call wherever you get your plugs from, call them and find out what that seed mix is. And then she makes a booklet with the pictures and just some highlights of what. So if it's not in that book, that's a weed, get rid of it. And so, we're going to do that for one of our customers. They just did a bioswale. So she's going to provide that to one of our customers because it's going to be daunting and it's going to be hard, and people aren't going to know what to do, especially with the native. So we struggled too initially with that. The other thing we're seeing a lot is clover pathways. And of course, clover is pollen for bees, but also it's in the 1950s, they used to use clover and grass seed mix a lot because it would create nitrogen and provide good soil and turf area. So they would mix it. Well, too many people were having their kids stung by bees. And so that whole thing changed. And so, but now we're starting to see clover, especially we've done 2 or 3 clover pathways, huge pathways. And they're doing it for, of course, pollen, and also because it's a good turf area for a lot of foot traffic. And so we're seeing a lot of that. Uh-oh. What does this say? Okay, yeah, if you could just, I can't move the slide. Sorry. That'll do it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I can't move the slide. Oh, will that work? Okay. So like we talked about bioswale maintenance to native seed maintenance, I guess the biggest difference is the vast area and trying to figure out what's what. So again, the identification process is really important. However you want to create a guide or find out what's in the mix and share with your customers, very important. Take care. We don't like to weed early because we want it to grow a little bit before we pull it, especially with native, because it could be mistakenly, with a actual native plant. So we'll be careful with that. Again, you want to be careful with the removal of the invasive species so it doesn't spread. And now this mowing is really dependent on the customer and the engineering plan or the landscape architect plan. Some of them require us to mow at 4 to 8 inches for the first 3 years, and oftentimes not at all until the 3rd year, and then they want flail mowing. So it really, that is really dependent on the maintenance plan that's set up. And clover maintenance is interesting because who would have ever thought you have to have some maintenance to clovers, because like I said, they're very durable. You mow clover 2 times a year after it drops its seed and right before the frost. You want to reseed every few years to maintain the quality and forage. And when we reseed when we actually seed it, the clover seeds are so small that there's no way you can put that in a spreader. So you got to hand, but in order to hand, spread, put some sand in your hand with it, and that'll give you an even distribution for when you replace your clover seed. And weed control, you know, weeds can choke out the clovers initially, but once the clovers take a shape, and they're pretty good about keeping the weeds out. And so early on, they have specific herbicides for clover areas, because it's almost impossible to try and pick the weeds. So, and the thing is, you know, we recommend if you're going to be in a area where a bunch of dog walkers, have clover, because clover does not turn yellow, it stays green, where our grass will turn green. So clover's pretty durable, sturdy. Here are the two really specific things we require our folks to have on hand: the picture of this app and the Department of Transportation Work Zone Safety. Make sure that they have that.
Can I
And-
add something?
Sure.
I would like to add something, for the resources, I took great infrastructure class through UWM Milwaukee Continuity of Education. I really enjoyed that class. I find it resourceful. And I know there are a few courses, certification online that you can take. That's other resources that you can find.
Yeah, and Sarah always talks to her employees about going on, and if they do, she'll pay part of their tuition for that class, for that one class.
Yeah.
All right, we are done.
Just checking. Okay, that's who I am. All right. Okay, my name's Philip Taylor. I am, let's see, with Hydro International, which is recently acquired by Oldcastle Infrastructure, which is a major supplier of stormwater control measures to the US and actually internationally. I've been in the, US now for, it's my 20th year now. So I've been in this business for 20 years. My background is civil engineering, municipal engineering in particular. I've worked in New Zealand and the UK, and as I say, for the last 20 years here in the US and stormwater quality. And in particular, the proprietary stormwater quality market, right? So my role is about education. It's about technical support. I spend a lot of time going to conferences and listening in to experts and gathering that information and bringing it back to the company, and we help our R&D people devise different systems and improve systems. Now, my talk is going to, and how long have I got?
22 minutes.
22 minutes, so that's 47. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to talk about, we have a trade name Biopod, but I'm going to talk about small and regional scale maintenance of green infrastructure. So, the process of green infrastructure is around about decentralization of your stormwater control measures and spreading it around the site. And that's a trend we're seeing nationally and internationally, like New Jersey recently, in the last couple of years, made their rule that you can't have more than 2.5 acres going to a single stormwater control measure. That includes ponds. So where you used to build a large pond for a 10-acre site, you now need 4 ponds at 2.5 acres. And it's all about spreading the load and recreating those original runoff coefficients and behaviors of the site. So it's dispersed and it's restoration of pre-development conditions. And it's the proprietary industry is part of this solution, right? You do a lot of non-proprietary stuff. The difference is that to be a proprietary system, we go through a tremendous amount of testing, right? We are tested to the nth degree because no one believes our products work, right? Because we put them in a box and we do magic things with that box and we don't tell people what's in that box. But we have a lot of data, a lot of information that we like to share. So the biopod is, and when we look at non-proprietary and proprietary systems these days, they're all very similar. You have some sort of pre-treatment system. I'm going to go through and we have, sorry, I'm going to skip, I got out of sequence there. So we have different configurations, versions that have trees, versions that have planting. And as it's sort of come up in conversation today, a lot of maintenance people don't like trees and planting because they never wanted to be gardeners, right? They've got a Vector truck and a Jetta. It's like, what do I do with that and a tree? How do I do this? So it's a difficult thing. So we get, there is a lot of use. And when you look at retrofitting into highly urbanized environments, it's really difficult, right, to do with non-proprietary systems, and you need to go underground. So this is where the proprietary systems come into play. And as I was mentioning, they're all very similar. We have a mulch layer, some sort of overdrain that connects to an underdrain. We have a media mix, some sort of engineered mix in there, and a clean gravel base layer going to the underdrain. So here we have basically a mass media filter, right? It's a big media filter. If there was no underdrain and it was an open bottom and it was going into the ground, it would be a bioinfiltration system. As soon as you put an underdrain under it, it's a filter. And we make these with, all the pieces that you need in a kit set, basically. We have a pre-treatment system. So you have the water coming in through a dispersion channel that allows water to pre-treat. The mulch acts as a pre-treatment as well. Then the media is under that, and then an outlet bay. So all that's in there, and there's importantly an irrigation port. This is something I tell engineers and people that are involved in developing a site. If you're irrigating the lawn, you should be irrigating your bioinfiltration system as well. It's not magically going to produce water and the plants are going to survive. So you have to consider it as part of a much larger site management plan. Just because it's in a box and it's kind of proprietary doesn't mean it's magic, right? We've got to maintain these things and get them established as well. We can have different configurations, but on the maintenance side, right, the death of most of these systems is lack of maintenance and in particular pre-treatment. There's a really good study. If you want to go and look up Ryan Winston, Ohio State University. He went out and studied systems that were at least 10 years old. And they did hydraulic studies and they did pollutant dispersion studies through them. His main takeaway from his entire study was pre-treatment, pre-treatment, and more pre-treatment. All the systems that had pre-treatment had 3 times the hydraulic conductivity than those that didn't because of that mass sediment load. So even basic pre-treatment will extend the life of the system. And this centralizes your maintenance to a point where you can actually get at it with a Vector truck, right? And you can do this and you can see it and you can maintain it. So the pre-treatment is critical, especially in a cold climate, right? Snow melt. Where's a good place to push the snow pile? The Bioswale. Now, you can't see it, but it's a depression at the end of the parking lot. It's a perfect place to push it. What's your most polluted water? Snow melt. I've got a photo I took in Denver last week. I was there doing some work and I went skiing. Right outside the hotel was a huge pile of snow. It was melting nicely and it was a huge pile of sediment. And that was, and that's where they push these. And I've done inspections on sites where clearly that's where the snow had been pushed because all the plants are all leaning the same way away from the parking lot. Had all been crushed by the ploughing. So anyway, that Ryan Wilson, he's a really good study that's online. University of Minnesota, St. Anthony Falls Lab. He presented there. It's recorded. It's online and on YouTube. Okay, so pre-treatment, we include that in our system. we know this because we do a lot of testing and we work out that pre-treatment's a critical part of the performance of long-term performance of these systems. So we have systems with pre-treatment, under drains in the pre-treatment, just to, in some areas, standing water is a problem because of vector, mosquitoes. So in some parts of the country, mosquitoes are a major pollutant concern because it's disease. And so you've got to have systems that don't have any standing water in them. So there's lots of different, we sit here in the context of a cold climate, but when you're in a context of a warmer climate, it's a different system altogether. You've got to have different problems and different things, under drains and stuff. Okay. So maintenance. The mulch layer on top is a critical part of this. This is something we work out because we do a lot of lab testing and we do different configurations. That mulch layer is actually an absolute critical part of these systems. That 2 inches of hardwood mulch is really important to maintain. You can make these things last a long time by maintaining that first 2 inches. So we have a guidance manual. I'm going to show some pictures here, but when we look at these systems, little visible sediment, we'll go through the picture that explains it better. Light sediment load. You can still see the mulch. There's a little bit of work going on, but this is the sort of thing where you can probably leave it alone. You might give it a bit of a scrape, a bit of a break up if it's a bit packed down, and say come back in 6 months or the next season. Then you get this medium sediment load. This medium load, you can scrape the surface and you can look at it and go, okay, I can see the hardwood mulch underneath that. It's probably due for maintenance. We should do it soon, but it's probably hydraulically working just fine. You might go skip this one from there. Even though it doesn't look too nice, you can see, and what you see here, you can see these little white patches. I'll just these little white patches here. Okay, that's not working. Let's see. Let's try a pen. Let's try my glasses. Laser pointer. There we go. These patches here. That's the actual storm mix media underneath, and it's white. It's a different color, so you can see that it hasn't changed. If it gets loaded with sediment, it turns into a browner color as the sediment is brown. So scraping away a little patch there, they could see that the media is actually clean. So that's the importance of that mulch layer. It's preventing this muck getting into the actual media that does a lot of the work on filtering water and removing pollutants. And then you get to the really nasty ones, where it is fully loaded. It's not draining. It's time to maintain it. Now, what do you do for the maintenance? Well, you don't need a Vector truck. Well, we actually say don't use a Vector truck, because what you don't want to do is start excavating out material that's still good, right? So gloves, rake, standard materials, spade. And what we want you to do is scrape that material into a bucket or into a bin and vector out of that bin. So you're not disturbing the media underneath, right? Because you can go to the hardware store and buy a bag of hardwood mulch and replace that for a few dollars. When you get in there with a Vector truck, you start vectoring out the storm mix media, you come to us and it costs a lot of money, right, to replace that media. So what happens when you can't do small regional systems and you really, the regulator or the regional authority says, look, it's great having 1 million little systems, but we want to centralize our treatment downstream because we can put one point of maintenance and we can manage it. So this is a system designed to treat, I think, well over 150 acres. Right? People say you can't do that, but you can. And when you do a system like this, and this is very new, this was done in the last couple of years, you form a partnership with the vendor because this is a long-term, hey, no one's ever done this before relationship. And so you go into it with a partnership approach. You're going to be working on this together for several years. These are actually, this is a huge biopod. And to the top, you can see more manholes, and I'm going to explain what that is. So and this has a pre-treatment separator at the front. It has upside down box culverts. And what we have here is a pre-treatment system. Water flows in, 13 and just over 13 CFS gets diverted to the water quality unit, the biopod. And then it goes from there into a big infiltration system, an ADS StormTech system. There's no outlet to this. This is all fully infiltrated. So this is effectively a pre-treatment system to another system which infiltrates. So 224 feet long, 22 feet wide, treats 13.1 CFS. Hydraulically considerations, the 6 inches of gravel, there's 20 inches of gravel under this. Same depth, 18 inches of storm mix, 2 inches of mulch. So very similar. I mean, it's nothing really technically different about this. It's just scale, right? And then you sort of appreciate the scale when you start putting people in and realize how big this is. So upside down box culverts, channels cast in there for the inlet and the outlet channels. We'll go through this. So we have an inlet channel, which conveys water down the center of the system and allows it to spill out to the side. And then that inlet channel is actually another box system, and the outlet is underneath. So there are pipes connected underneath. The underdrains go into the same channel and drain out. See, they're not connected here. But now one of the things about this is that, okay, now we've got to control hydraulics as well, right? Because the water doesn't spread evenly. So as part of this, these slots can be altered in height. So the City of Renton actually has a whole set of controls that they can go in and swap it out over time and control where the water goes, right? So over time, they'll learn how it performs and they will adjust the hydraulics of the inlet channel accordingly. You can see the under drains there. And that's the outlet channel underneath. This is the gravel bedding, which has got the under drains in it. And then we have the storm mix media go on top. And you can see the color. This is the color of the storm mix media. And then the mulch layer. So exactly the same, just on a much larger scale. And then the inlet. Now we're working on different systems to eliminate the rock, because no one likes rock. It's really hard to clean rock. In this case, it's just acting as an erosion control for each of those inlet slots in the manifold. But again, the same thing. Now they can just really, your inspection looks at that mulch. They can replace the mulch. And for safety and for maintenance access, large covers, lightweight covers, so they can lift everything off and effectively make it non-confined space entry, more or less, because they have full aeration through the whole system as well. So designed with maintenance in mind. And then planting each side to hide it. So that from the parking lot, you look out, you don't see it, you just see plants. So a lot of stuff goes into a system of this size. You can see here, oops, the entrance to the manifold system for the infiltration area over here, which is off to the right. Each one of these is a different system. So yeah, you can do green infrastructure on a large scale and make it really easy to maintain, because now you have a single point of maintenance for a whole 160 acre or more, 200 acre development. Now we can do this in perhaps it's a little easier on the West Coast. This is in Washington, because the rainfall pattern is a more dispersed rainfall pattern. It's not done, here. If this was Florida, this would be harder, because the rain comes in very compressed, short bursts. So we need to consider things like that when designing systems. And we're looking at this at the moment, is what's the impact of changing rainfall on maintenance? What's the impact of changing rainfall on the design of systems when you take a compressed, what's really happening is we're seeing a compressed water year. That we're seeing short periods of heavy rain and long periods of drought. And that's going to affect your planting and your consideration of the type of plants that you use and the maintenance of systems. You get 10 inches of rain in 1 month and then 6 months of no rain. That really impacts engineering design. It impacts design of bioinfiltration systems and the maintenance. So we're learning a lot. We're still learning about these things, as you know, as you hear people talk. It's not, we're still learning a lot about how to manage stormwater. And that's the end of my presentation. Okay.
My name is Cassie. I work with Ferguson. I actually used to work with Stormwater Solutions Engineering, so probably you guys know me from that, for 6 years, and then the last half year as AQUALIS. So I now work with Ferguson Waterworks Group, the Geo Stormwater team, and I support civil engineers, landscape architects, developers, municipalities, et cetera, contractors to provide a suite of solutions as it's addressing challenges associated with geo and stormwater design. So today, based on it being a maintenance seminar, which was a brainchild of Carrie's mind back a few years ago, I thought I'd present on some pre-treatment devices that can really help. When I went from engineering to the Ferguson side, I was like, wow, like this would have been really nice to know about these things that could have helped in my design back in the day. So I just thought that'd be something good to kind of show today. So I'm just going to go over a quick background of Ferguson, then the triple bottom line co-benefits of GI, then get into the really pre-treatment and specific devices. So I wanted to start with the slide because after being a consultant for a long time, when I talked to our director, Rob, and he was like, yeah, like, do you want to work with Ferguson? I was like, what? Like, I don't want to sell pipe. That's weird. I was very confused. We actually have been working over the past 3 years. He has on developing the stormwater and urban runoff team. So normally you'd probably think, yes, like you get your under drain, your Nina grates, whatnot from Ferguson, but we have this really cool subset group that I'm a part of. And, it's just pretty much in the space where it's followed what green infrastructure plans are doing in the cities and what we were trying to offer with, whether it's ourselves or our vendor partners as some solutions. So we came up with these categories of space efficient storage, filters and screens, media biofiltration, alternative surfaces, and urban landscapes. We're really just focusing on those solutions. And today I'm going to really just be getting into mainly the filters and screen sides of it because that's where the pre-treatment devices are. So getting into gray infrastructure, I feel like everybody kind of knows it, but that switch from your gray including the focus on the green infrastructure has just been proven to be a better and dynamic approach to both water quantity and quality, right? It's helping our downstream effects. And it brings municipalities or just anybody who has like an MS4 compliancy up to that regulation. Okay, so thinking about the amazing benefits of implementing green infrastructure, there's a lot, right? So you have your triple bottom co-line benefits, and that's your environmental side of it. So thinking about your water pollution, reducing that urban heat island effect, your social, so thinking of the aesthetics of your community, just in general, I'd say public acceptance to any kind of green infrastructure. That's the biggest thing. I know, Sarah hit on it of what is this? Why does it look like that? As we all know, it's about education and continually just making sure that people understand why we're doing this. And then also that economic side. So reducing, the costs of things. We're really just thinking about what the full benefits are. But as we grow awareness around green infrastructure, we have to really remember that to reach those benefits, a lot has to go through it. So no project is the same. Really looking at design variables when we're thinking about designing about what space is available, what's the goal, right? So is it for water quality, for quantity? Things like your soil conditions, steep slopes, looking at your site, what's going to be the optimal place to put something in comparison to just what you're thinking where it could go. I think the biggest thing that I definitely learned was you have to go out on site, you have to be looking at it, eyes on the grounds, inspecting it, really seeing what's out there before you're putting something in. Pictures can go, maybe 75% of the way, but 100% is for sure being out there in the field, understanding where you can put things based on what's happening on site. It's really beneficial. So other less definable variables. So the opinions, past experiences, thinking always about the budget in mind, winter consideration, that's something of ours up here. And the biggest things, collaboration is key, right? No matter what, it's just like, Sarah's saying too, making sure that you're going to be continually having those conversations with everybody that's on site, your engineer, getting them to understand why something may have to change because of constructability. Public retrofits especially have a lot of their own unique challenges, as there are utilities buried that we don't know about, things that are just uncertainties. So when looking at these projects and taking a survey from 150 engineers, kind of like fun, this was a Family Feud thing that my director put together, but I'm going to cut to the chase. The main challenges we're seeing is cost and maintenance. And it's over years, right? So continually saying over multiple years, what's going to be the biggest thing? It's maintenance and cost. So that's kind of been the story since the beginning of the time, right? That's always what it is. Do you have enough personnel? Do you have enough budget to do this? So what we can really do to think about protecting those BMPs throughout the years of its lifespan, knowing that it's the budget just is not what it could be, and we don't have time to really fix it, is really thinking about pretreatment. So enter pretreatment. What is it going to do? It's going to be helping with your energy dissipation, allow sediment to settle, giving somewhere for that trash and debris to be captured. I know, Phil kind of just hit on some of this stuff too, with the pretreatment of seeing all that sediment going into that little nook area before your bioswale on the sides. Really thinking about why is it going to be helpful. So you are thinking about that maintenance and the longevity of it. If there is going to be the hydraulic connectivity that's still there, and you're able to not have a just ponding bioswale where you're not going to have any type of infiltration, which that's the whole point of it. And just think about, if it wasn't there, what really will happen on site? Will you have erosion that will happen with a year, 2 years, 3 years? Are you going to have a buildup of sediment, trash? Are you going to have costly repairs? Carrie hit on that, thinking about when you're going to be doing something maybe every year, every 2 years, as compared to every 5 or 10 years. What's going to really help in that longevity of it? I just added this code in there also from the WGNR tech standards. So the purpose of any type of pretreatment device is really to reduce the stormwater pollutant load to waters of the state, or for pretreatment to an infiltration system. So they themselves also know, like, this is something that's needed. It's just a good way to go. So how do we select an appropriate pretreatment device? We're looking at performance. What's really required? Is it required at all? It's pretty much not anywhere. There are a few states on the East Coast that really require pretreatment before a BMP. Otherwise, it's more so just like good common faith of an engineer. What needs to be captured? Thinking about the aesthetics, public perception is important. We all walk by BMPs. We're all making judgments. Even if we're an engineer, you're going to say, oh, that one over in that Cermak area, I would have never thought about that design, or this one right here in front of the Global 247 Freshwater, that's what its name is now, building. I never would have thought about that curb cut. I've seen a car go into there. Things like that, we're all going to make judgments. People want to be living in areas that aren't flooding, that look nice, that don't have trash debris outside their front home. I mean, right? Like, I'd say we all want that. Thinking about the cost of it, what is the budget? Is there a budget for maintenance in mind? And if not, how can you make it more of a conversation where it needs to be thought about? And then maintenance in general, everything does need maintenance. Putting that into perspective, what can you compare it to if you're not going to be doing any type of maintenance? So that's kind of just the amp up of, why pretreatment is needed and everything. So I'm just going to go over a few different pretreatment devices for surface BMPs, and then I'll go over some for underground storage units. I just put a few in here. We have like a lot of really cool vendor partners, but I just wanted to do a few that I know have been really awesome lately. So pre-treatment for some rain gardens, bioretention, bioswales, grass swales, any type of, vegetative facility. That's what we're going to look at first here. I'm going to start with the rain guardians. So these were actually developed by the Anoka Conservation District in Minnesota. And I think that just speaks to it itself. Like when this is made by a group that was continually getting public outrage of why is my median bioswale in my city looking like this? How can this be dealt with better? There's not a person to really go continually there every week to pick up the trash, the amount of stuff that would be thrown out of somebody's car window and put into a bioswale. And they really wanted to think about what they can do to help collect that stuff and also be collecting like the solids and the sediments that's going to be weighing on your biofilter for a long time. So they came up with 4 different designs, and I'll go through them each, but these are pretty much, there's concrete, then there's also a plastic structure that removes some of your TSS, trash, debris. They are decentralized devices. They're super simple. They can be a retrofit, doesn't have to be at the beginning of the design. If you have any type of like curb cut area, that's what you're really thinking of it to be going into. And then these ones are for kind of your smaller areas, but this is the turret. It's a really cute, like little circular device. And you have your curb cut comes in, you can see solids and everything building up, going into the filter area. Actually, the picture before, just to go, this is what it is, this one. So there's your top grate, water comes to the back, and then you have your overflow on the side where you have your exit. There's also a filter down here, so that's going to be blocking the final water versus sediment, debris, etc., from going within. So it's restricting floatable debris from entering the BMP, and then that outlet configuration can also change to be 90, 130, or 180 degrees, dependent on where you want your water to be going into your BMP. If it's not going to be a straight chute and you have your BMP to the side, these are really great for just small site applicable areas. So you're kind of looking at very small things. This one's probably the biggest bioswale, but the other ones are really small median areas where the developer didn't have a lot of space and they thought of something that would, be helpful on site to still get their water quality and quantity requirements in. The next one's the bunker. This one, there's a top metal grate that captures your leaf and coarse debris. It's a lightweight recycled plastic chamber design. So compared to the concrete systems, it's ultra resistant to like any type of rotting. The anodized aluminum filter is corrosion resistant as well, thinking that we're up here, we're using salt. That's what a lot of our stuff has. This one's more used for residential applications a lot of the time. And you can see it's more of a rectangular configuration. This next one is the Fortress. So like the turret, it's a precast concrete structure. The top and the internal steel grate will collect your large trash debris. Then the internal removable filter just helps keep the collected solids from entering your BMP. And then there's also just a high overflow as well. You can see with all these pictures too, they're used in different applications. If you're still going to have riprap area, if it's going to be straight up a grass bioswale or anything else. And then this last one from the Rain Guardians is the Foxhole. This one is used for applications where you're conveying water from maybe your parking lot area, your alley, your street, across the sidewalk into your BMP. So thinking about, you can still have your bike or pedestrian passageway go over it, but your water can be transported to the other side. Again, just different filters in there to be holding back all that trash, debris, and sediment. You can also see this one has the top grates, which they're lightweight, pretty easy to take off. So for all of these, it's a really easy thing to just take up your screen. You can use a shovel, you can use a shop vac, you could use a pressure washer, you can use a full-on vac truck. It really depends on what you want to do, but it doesn't require a vac truck is the biggest thing. So if you don't have a lot of that in your budget, you can just have a person go out there and be maintaining these easily, hosing off screens. It's pretty simple stuff. And then for those larger areas where you're having, your large acre plus going to it, we have a pretext device. So this one is more similar to what your like inlet structure will look like with a baffle and weir. It's concrete, collects all of that stuff. It's again, another decentralized device. And then this is just what it looks like in person. So the water can come back. You can see on both of them. Water can either come in through a similar curb cut area or in through your top grate. And then it goes with your baffle mirror where you have your sediments and solids and trash settling at the bottom. And then it eventually will go out through a final filter either to, your BMP, or if you have even, you can see the top one, you have a higher stone area where you have infiltration right away instead of just going above surface into it. Again, just something where you can back jet it out, but you can also just use small, simple things like shovels and shop vacs. Hopping into pretreatment for subsurface. I know I'm like probably 5 minutes, not even. There's a lot of different storage options out there. Philip mentioned ADS Storm Tech. You have circular pipes. You have maybe like your storm capture, big concrete systems, or a modular system. For some of those, there are treatment rows and isolator rows within there, which is a really great thing to think about. It's not required here. It's isolator maintenance rows are only required in underground systems within California, Florida, and Texas. So it's really one of those things to kind of think about of, well, if you're going to be shooting water fully into a system, would it make it easier if there's one row that you have to be vac jetting out maybe every 2-5 years, depending on what the site is doing? Or would you want to have the whole system that has to be fully, looked at for that cleaning? So it's just like that dedicated row that really helps. It's just a simple solution, something when thinking about design, what can be put in. And then when you're looking more at what could be done before your underground systems, your centralized pretreatment is just a really big thing. I think these are things that we've all seen, heard, know about. They're kind of like, I'd say, the most boring part of when you're thinking about underground storage stuff. But what it's really doing is it's getting your sediments, your trash, your debris, your solids. Most of them are NJCAT, NJDEP, Washington Tape Guld approved. So when you're thinking that you need to be hitting that for your regulatory, those certifications are really nice to have. This just lists some of them and also has pictures. There's cartridge-based units. There's your separation systems, like your First Defense, your downstream defender. Everybody knows a contact, I feel like, vortex system. Your hydrodynamic separators as well. Really depends on just how much space you have in site and what do you want it to do. I feel like we've all probably opened one of these and looked at it and just seen like garbage galore, but that's awesome that it's not going into your underground storage system. And then I'll just show kind of some pictures of stuff. This is cartridge-based units. So this is upstream of a BMP, and you can just see you put normal grates and stuff over it, depending on where you're putting it, just fit right into an inlet. Getting specifically, switching into decentralized screens and filters. If you don't have the space on site or the need for a really large centralized system, you can look at something like your perforated screens, your high flow geotextile bags, other cartridge-based units that have an overflow. Just with these different mounting options where it can be in pipe or around the pipe, it's a great thought because I feel like normally when you're thinking about maintenance, you're always thinking about solids. You're not fully thinking about that trash capture, and it's just really nice to have something that's blocking trash out specifically and not always just your sediments. This one is just showing a geotextile bag and an inlet. This was for a city where they needed to make sure that they have CSOs, but they also wanted to make sure that they were capturing stuff instead of getting their whole system blocked up, what they've had for years, just blocked pipes. So that was a really nice thought. We also do a lot of really custom work with one of our vendor partners, Fabco, specifically making screens and filters for what the inlets are. I think a lot of you could testify to the fact that not every single inlet is a nice new, brand new shiny concrete structure. It's maybe brick and mortar. It could be absolutely large or absolutely small. So just having that thought of something that can be custom and go in there to really do what your municipality needs is really nice, especially thinking about the pollutant removal specific to them. Same thing here, just different screen boxes and different ways to be putting stuff in to have water go to the side before it's going to go into your system or into a BMP. This one was my favorite. I think this is how, besides our tank, I learned about Ferguson, but we would put these in to our standpipes and our Milwaukee public school sites, thinking just about what's going to happen when a bioswale gets full of water? Well, all your floatables go, and then they go to your final outlet standpipe. And what happens is then that's going into your system. Just having a very simple, quick bag in there, and it's can be put in as a retrofit. It just has an expanding ring, and then just being able to lift your top beehive grate off, take your bag out, and put that into the garbage is so much easier and nicer than knowing what you sent downstream. This is just showing a picture of, quick stuff that can get collected in there really easily. And then just this one again, this is something we specifically like to be putting on to inlet pipes before it goes to the underground structure systems, just a connector pipe screen, making sure that you're blocking all the big stuff out. It's good to have the settling in your underground storage system of your sediments, but making sure that you're not going to have all the big stuff going is just a really simple thing to think about with maintenance. Is it easier to open up your inlet and grab all your water bottles, your cigarette butts, your bottle caps, your vape cartridges, whatever, is going to be going in there? Or would you rather have to order a vac truck to, do that in the underground system? Okay, kind of went through that really fast because I wanted to push through. So just some final thoughts. Maintenance is one of the biggest challenges we all know we're facing. So pre-treatment devices really enhance your treatment performance. It's reducing your long-term maintenance. If you're just doing continual small maintenance of a pre-treatment device, not having to fully look at the infiltration rates of your BMP or look at your underground storage system, that's going to just be really helpful. Engineers can carefully select your pre-treatment devices based on your performance, aesthetics, cost, and maintenance. Having those conversations and collaborating is just the key here. And then again, just thinking about that adaptable design. Once you're getting through the design, permit, install, maintain, going back and discussing if that's the best thing or if it needs to change continually. And I'll just leave you with this last one, which one would you rather clean out, right? I think that's a big thing for me. Yeah. Thanks.
We'd ask our last three presenters to come down and have a seat. We will continue recording until we're done with the questions. So if you do have questions online, please send them in. Do we have questions? Anybody here? Cassandra, pay attention.
Yep. Question.
I have one question that keeps coming up for a lot of our urban clients is that their grades keep disappearing. And so Phil showed an incredibly gigantic device, but then you said these
They're not, they're disappearing because they're met.
yeah, so the ones that you have on those devices are not metal. Oh, okay. That helps. Yeah.
It's not a scalable component, so yeah.
We've had beehives missing too.
Yeah. So, well, we've been looking for locking ones. Hard to find something that's fitting a large size diameter and that's locking. So, and I was curious about that with yours too, with some of your.
The rain guard ones,
grades.
yeah, those are not, majority is not metal, yeah, as well, because of that thought,
Yeah,
yeah.
the ones that go over the sidewalk that you were showing. Is there a way to lock those down or?
The ones that go over, no, they don't lock down, but the top is not metal. The bottom inside one, I guess, is, but
It's just the grate cover.
yeah,
Would
it's
take
the
off.
actual cover. I mean, I don't think they'd want to take off that top one. It's nothing, but they could scrap for change.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah, probably have to note, hey, this is not metal.
Well, I think they like. Metal. We have a question in the audience. Back row.
Seeding versus plugs with native plant. What are you seeing and what are the disadvantages, advantages of each? And then also on bioswales with hardwood mulch, issues with the hardwood mulch floating and going down the drain pipe during heavy rain events.
Okay, so I'll repeat the question because people can't hear. Question is bioswale plugs versus seed and hardwood mulch versus other options, or how do you get mulch to stay? basically, and not float.
First question, we prefer plugs. Because, we've had some events, we did a park not too long ago. And the geese and duck and birds, they get into the seed and all of a sudden you have no growth. And so we prefer the plugs because it's a visual and we're able to monitor them and water them and cultivate them. And so, yeah, plugs versus seeds for us. And also when you have like torrential rains and, you know, you're gonna see some of your seed all in one area. So a lot of times we have to go back and overseed certain areas because of flow and rain and snow after snowfall. So
Could you do some of both? Could you do some plugs and then overseed just to get a little more possible?
yeah, we've never had that, but, you know,
I've heard a lot of times doing the plugs at the bottom, and then if there's like the upper top of this, like not the sides, but the top, like filtration strip being the only seed area.
right, we'll do normal, a lot of times I've seen.
What are you seeing from designers? Are they mostly plugs or?
It's usually the landscape architect is where we get our, you know, we just follow the plans.
And they're mostly plugs.
Yes, majority are plugs. Some smaller areas are shrubbery and number 2 pots and.
There's another option too that's pretty fun. That's the rollout native sod. Have you been seeing that
We've
quite a
done
bit?
that.
Really expensive, but maybe a little bit more chance of
Right,
success.
we've done a couple of them. Sods very expensive. It's got the seed and everything in it. But the problem is, you get someone coming by with a lawnmower.
Mm.
And then you have problems and kind of null and voids your warranty on
So a little sign maybe.
fencing.
Signage or fencing, yeah.
For those areas and, maybe a special landscaper that is involved with that as far as doing the maintenance for the first year at least.
And then the question about hardwood mulch.
Hardwood mulch, we use a lot of hardwood mulch and yes, we do see it, you know, redistribute after rain and snow and, you know, so we do have to kind of, you know, move it back around. Some of the designs of late have not had any, but we're struggling with the weeds and, you know, high weeds and they're choking out the plants. So it's, you know, even if we used a jute netting or another supportive structure, it's pushing up the netting and you can't get the weeds until the netting's pushed up. And so it's just been really a difficult challenge without the mulch. We have better.
Have you seen the mulch with the jute netting on top to hold the mulch down?
Yeah,
You tried
I've
that?
never seen that.
Okay.
We did suggest that once and they said no, because it's going to go back into the sewer system and somehow.
If you put a geotextile storm sack in there, then you can just,
There you go.
Yeah,
pop your mulch right back out.
redistribute it, right?
They should mow. Because it's too sparse, you plant too far apart. There's a space right here, they can plant erosion, movement, mulch, and over 3 years, the plants are fully fresh. And less chance of mulch going around because they're flourishing.
So the comment from Sarah is that if there are enough plants, your spacing should be pretty consolidated so that there's enough plants to kind of keep the mulch from taking off. Yeah.
And then also was there's fish at Mowing, kind of like they get touch because each other, they actually help battle both of them. Suppressing them.
Which also helps to block weed growth. As, yeah. Jim had a question?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out the best way to ask it. How would any of you recommend that, you know, because, you know, as designers, as engineers, how do you bridge the knowledge gap between what you all know and what we as designers are trying to do for our clients in terms of finding a solution? I can think of for sure 2, maybe even 3 projects that I'm working on right now that, you know, I would love to have that kind of information, you know, yesterday or, you know, last year or something like that. What is there a tool out there? Is there a recommended resource to bridge that knowledge gap?
So the question is, sorry, I have to restate. What is the best way of learning what we learned today about all the different products, about pretreatment and all these things? Is there a way, short of having you come in and do a lunch and learn or whatever, or what we just did, so that people who are doing a design, like right now, there's so many options, like what do you choose and how do you learn?
This is something that I've been studying in the industry a little bit recently, that you work in a certain way, right? And you tend to work in maybe digital models and you lay out a site in a site plan and you're using a hydraulic model of some kind to work out all your flows. And within that hydraulic model, there might be, like Windslam, a few solutions that you can plug and play with. The bigger industry doesn't do that, right? So we have a disconnect between those that make the environment you work in initially and us who make the physical products that work in that with that model, right? So the digital world and the physical world are not talking to each other. And that's something that we're going to look at solving in the near future, is that forming partnerships between, say, Autodesk and other companies like that, and say, we need more information about our products in your software. And they're not thinking like that, and we're not thinking like them. But once we get those two worlds together, you might then have a site layout in your computer and go, I'm going to plug and play this, plug and play that, and have the data I need in that, and then run the model, see how it works. And go, that didn't work. There's another one over here, I'll plug and play that one. And that's the missing piece, because right now you've got to go to our website and say, okay, I'm designing Bioswale. I've got this proprietary piece of software on our website. You got to do it and get it into your model somehow. And you've got to know it exists to do it. And so how do you know it exists? You have to get us into a brown bag. It's a really slow process, right?
Yeah, I mean, thinking about like the full scope thing, like obviously there's in HydroCAD, there's like ADS storm text, there's underground detention system stuff out there already for you to plug and play with. But yeah, there's not a lot of like the pretreatment device and stuff. I would just give almost the rhetorical answer back of it's things like this. Just continually educating yourself, you know, sure, Google, DuckDuckGo, whatever, you can search whatever you want to, but it's just continually getting yourself out there, talking to people. You don't have to wait for like a lunch and learn or something, but just continually networking at events and asking the questions and finding, like, I think I probably have searched like water, climate, summits, conferences, networking events, and just have found so many different things where I can go and learn stuff and, you know, really be just continually talking and having that communication there, because yeah, I think it's honestly, it gets down to networking. Just what can you learn?
Have there been questions online that we want to take real quick?
Sure, one question that's piggybacking.
Okay.
So I saw a lot of Washington tape come up.
Mm-hmm.
So Jim and I are actually on a project in Washington where the stormwater manager who did the inspection was like, hey, you know, for this type of site, we do recommend, you know, Washington tape certified equipment. And so like Old Castle was on one of the companies that are on that list. So I think getting connected with the states is also a good idea.
I mean, that's like when you look at like our companies, that's our product development team's job, yeah, to continue to look at your regulatory groups and make sure that whether it's like your DOT events, DOT groups, that you're on an approved vendor list, if it's your sewage districts, if it's your whatnot. I mean, that's like a whole different conversation topic, because just like you as an engineer would be specifying something that you think is fine, and then the DOT would say no or something. That's just a bigger conversation for sure. And not everything has to be or is Washington Tape Gold certified or NJCAT or NJDEP. It just really depends on your state's regulatory mandates. So yeah.
Carly, I didn't bring a device up here to read the questions, if you don't mind.
Sure. Do any of the treatment units have tested nutrient load reduction percentages?
I'm assuming that's for me.
All
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
proprietary systems do.
If there's like a detail and a spec sheet on our websites, otherwise I can definitely send stuff, but yeah. If it's not all, the majority already have those details out there and tell you specifically what the TSS or TPRT reductions are.
Yeah, especially through the Washington process. The
Yep.
the New Jersey process is focused purely on TSS reduction, whereas the Washington, you can go, they have TSS oils, phosphorus, enhanced metals. And so it's a smorgasbord of tests you can run on your product and get certification for. And they've actually gone very recently to a much more strict test. Their hydraulic testing now requires that you have to do, you get your initial approval or you get your final approval. You then have to go out and test 4 more sites independently for hydraulic conductivity to prove that you can last a full water year. So their testing has become really intensive. I mean, we spend millions of dollars going through this process. And that's why these things are expensive. We have to go through a multi-million-dollar approval process before we can sell it to anything with that standpoint. So they are really high standards. They're the best standards in the world, you know, for proving these things work. Yeah.
Any other questions in the in-person audience? Online?
There was one before, which I think you answered a little bit, but what are alternatives to Roundup and other chemicals? And this is where it's difficult to manually remove vegetation. What are your thoughts there?
We like using a vinegar Dawn, but it has to be 45%. If it's less than 45%, it's less effective. So it's like a Epsom salt soap, dish soap Dawn, and 45% vinegar. You can't get that anywhere other than online. And so it's more of a natural, and we take care of the water department. And so it's very crucial that they have careful consideration when selecting the herbicide. And they liked our idea of using the vinegar, and it was very effective.
That almost sounds like secret stuff you shouldn't share with us, because that sounds like really good, you know? Yeah.
There's a number of natural herbicide pollution and coconut oil and stuff like that. There are some commercial companies out there producing these contact type non-hormonal natural systems. It just basically they dehydrate the cell, or they cause the cell wall to break in the plant. They may not get to the root. That's one of the problems, right?
Yeah, I've tried the vinegar thing, but with grocery store vinegar, and it worked for one cycle, and then the stuff all came back, and then it felt like a big waste of my time. So really nice to hear that.
I've seen in New Zealand using steam.
Yeah.
They use steam just to burn the plant and do those in the curb and channels along roads.
Mm-hmm. A nice use for the vac jet folks that have high pressure. Okay, well, I think that'll do it. You guys have been an awesome audience.